Hello friends, this is Sanjay. This is part 7 of the series where I am covering Constitutional Law 1 and 2 as per the standard LLB syllabus. The playlist for this complete series is available on the Lawment YouTube channel. Download a copy of the Constitution from this URL and after every session, read the articles that we have covered in that video. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below this video. In this video, we will cover Part 4 of the Indian Constitution, which contains the Directive Principles of State Policy. The Directive Principles are covered under Articles 36 to 51. First, we will get a better understanding of what are these Directive Principles and why are they included in the Constitution. That is, we will look at their importance. We will read through all the Directive Principles and focus our discussion more on the important principles and how the Directive Principles affect the functioning of the government and the statutes or the laws that are enacted. I will also cover the relationship between the Directive Principles and the fundamental rights and the relationships between the Preamble and the Directive Principles. We will also look at some landmark judgments about the Directive Principles of State Policy. Before we look at them in detail, we should first understand why are they called Directive Principles. They are directive because they give directions. Now, what are directions? Well, we can understand this term better through this example. Suppose I want my friend to go from Bengaluru to Delhi. I can give him directions or I can give him instructions. If I give him directions, I am just giving a general guidance or a high-level path. On the other hand, if I give him instructions, I am specifying the steps to be followed or the exact route to be followed. Directions are objective oriented. I am just specifying the objective that he needs to go from Bengaluru to Delhi. I am not specifying how he should get there. If I give instructions, the details I give are more task oriented and precise. I am telling him to travel by road and also the exact route that he should follow. Directions are open to interpretation. If I am just saying go to Delhi from Bengaluru, he can choose to go by road, by train or by flight. Instructions are not open to interpretation. I will be specifying where he should go, when he should go and how to get there. So, Directive Principles of State Policy means that they are high-level directions that the state policy should follow. They are not precise instructions. They are just telling the government what should be the high-level goals or objectives of state policy. And they are not giving precise instructions on how to exactly achieve those objectives. Granville Austin was an American historian who studied the Indian Constitution extensively and wrote 2 books on our Constitution. He was also awarded the Padma Shri in 2011. He considered the Directive Principles and the fundamental rights to be the conscience of the Constitution. What is the conscience? It is the inner voice or the inner sense that tells us what is right and what is wrong. It serves as an internal moral compass, prompting us to act in ways that we believe are correct, honorable, or ethical. But the conscience cannot force a person to act in a particular way. It can only act as a guide. Similarly, the Directive Principles guide the government on what it should do, what it should work towards. But the Directive Principles cannot force the government to act in a specific way. Article 36 just states that the meaning of the term state as used in Part 4 is the same as what it means in Part 3, where this term is actually defined. Article 37 states that the Directive Principles are not enforceable by the courts, but it is the duty of the state to apply these principles while making laws. Article 38 Clause 1 says that the government should promote the welfare of all citizens and work towards social, economic and political justice for all. Article 38 Clause 2 says that the government should minimize income inequalities and eliminate inequalities in facilities and opportunities. Logically, you cannot eliminate income inequalities and it will be unfair to do so. All that the government must do is to provide every person with similar facilities and opportunities. And if some persons are able to generate a higher income than others using the same facilities and opportunities, that should not be discouraged. Article 39 talks about certain principles of policy to be followed by the state. And you will see that the state does indeed follow all of these principles while creating laws and policies. Legislations like the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act and the various programs run by the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship and the different state governments work towards providing all citizens with an adequate means of livelihood. Various state-level land reform acts try to redistribute the ownership and control of land across the community. The Urban Land Ceiling and Regulation Act, the state-level land ceiling acts, the Income Tax Act, and the Wealth Tax laws try to address the concentration of wealth. The Equal Remuneration Act and the rules by various organizations, such as the BCCI, try to work towards the goal of equal work, equal pay. The POSCO Act and other legislations are aimed at protecting children and youth from abuse and exploitation. The Legal Services Authorities Act and the establishment of the national and state level legal services authorities are aimed at providing equal justice and free legal aid across the country to all citizens. Various state level Panchayat Raj Acts help with the organization of village panchayats. As I have mentioned, the Rural Employment Guarantee Act and the various government policies address the right to work. The RTE Act and the system of government schools work towards the right to education. The Senior Citizen Act, the system of government hospitals and other agencies work towards public assistance in certain cases such as old age, sickness and disablement. The Factories Act and the Maternity Benefit Act are aimed at providing just and humane conditions of work and maternity relief. The Minimum Wages Act and the various other rules address the objectives of providing a living wage for all workers, agricultural, industrial or otherwise. The legislations like the Trade Unions Act and the Industrial Dispute Act enable the participation of the workers in the management of industries. The Multi-State Cooperative Societies Act and various state-level cooperative societies acts promote cooperative societies across India. There are several ongoing attempts to bring in Universal Civil Code for all citizens in India. The National Early Childhood Care and Education Policy looks into the provision of early childhood care and education to children below the age of 6 years. The National Commission for Scheduled Castes Act and the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes Act, the Central Education Institutions Reservation in Admissions Act, and other government policies promote the educational and economic interests of the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, and other weaker sections of the society. Legislations like the Cigarettes and Other Tobacco Products Act and the Prohibition of Electronic Cigarettes Act are aimed at improving public health. Various government policies and legislations like the Food Safety and Standards Act are aimed at raising the level of nutrition and ensuring food safety in India. Government programs like the vaccination campaign are aimed at improving public health. There are several national and state level laws that are aimed at organizing agriculture. Acts like the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act protect animals, including cows, calves, and other cattle. The Wildlife Protection Act, the Environment Protection Act, and other government policies work towards the protection and improvement of the environment, forests, and wildlife across India. With regards to the protection of monuments and places and objects of national importance, there is the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act and other rules. As we have discussed in a previous video, India has a system of checks and balances where the judiciary can review the actions of the executive or strike down any laws passed by the legislature if they are unconstitutional or violate any fundamental rights. The legislature has the power to pass laws that can change the basis of any judgment as long as the law is within the limits imposed by the Constitution. All of this is a part of the separation of the judiciary from the executive and also the legislature. And with regards to the promotion of international peace and security, there are acts like the Extradition Act, the Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act, the United Nations Privileges and Immunities Act, and the International Courts and Tribunals Act. So, we have seen that the state actually follows the directive principles in the creation and implementation of its policies and statutes. Let us now look at the relationship between fundamental rights and the directive principles of state policy. Fundamental rights are individual rights, whereas the directive principles focus on collective social welfare. Fundamental rights are justiciable, that is, they can be enforced through the courts if required. But the Constitution itself clearly states that the directive principles cannot be enforced. If we go through all the fundamental rights and the directive principles, we can see that they are complementary, which means that even though they are in two different sections of the Constitution, they work together. Fundamental rights are very important in our Constitution, and the directive principles provide a framework for implementing the fundamental rights. For example, a right to equality is a fundamental right under Articles 14 to 18. And equality can be implemented through social, economic and political justice, which is the focus of Article 38. The rights to freedom and education are guaranteed under Articles 19 to 22, and the same right to work, education and public assistance are covered by the directive principles under Articles 41 to 43. The cultural and educational rights under Articles 29 and 30 are also the focus of Article 46, which promotes the educational and economic interests of the weaker sections. So, fundamental rights and directive principles work together to secure the rights and the welfare of all citizens. Let us now look at the relationships between the preamble and the directive principles. The preamble is part of the basic structure and lays down the foundational values of the Indian Constitution. The directive principles provide the framework for governance to achieve those values. The preamble seeks to secure social, economic and political justice, and the directive principles through articles like 38 and 39 direct the state to ensure justice in various spheres. The preamble emphasizes or gives importance to the liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship. And articles in the directive principles indirectly promote the idea of liberty in both social and economic aspects. Both the preamble and the directive principles emphasize the principle of equality. For example, Article 39A mandates that the state should ensure both men and women have equal right to livelihood. The preamble's assurance of fraternity is mirrored in the directive principles, where articles like 38.2 advise minimizing inequalities in income, status, facilities and opportunities. Both the preamble and the directive principles like Article 41, which is the right to work and education, emphasize upholding the dignity of the individual by providing work and education. The preamble underlines the unity and integrity of the nation, and the directive principles through guidelines for equitable resource distribution and communal harmony indirectly promote the same. The preamble's objective of establishing a welfare state is reflected in the numerous articles of the directive principles which direct the state to ensure the well-being of its citizens. Over the years, there have been several important judgments about the directive principles, their importance, their relationship with fundamental rights, and how they should influence the legislative actions of the government. I will quickly run through a few landmark judgments and what the court held in each of these decisions. In the state of Madras versus Chempakam Dorairajan judgment, the Supreme Court held that the directive principles cannot override fundamental rights. This should be understood in the context of the later judgment in the Golaknath versus State of Punjab case, where the court held that the fundamental rights and directive principles must be balanced and neither of them is superior to the other. In the Kerala Education Bill judgment, the court held that the directive principles, though not enforceable, are fundamental in the governance of the state and should be applied while making any laws or statutes. In the Kesavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala case, the court held that a harmonious interpretation of the fundamental rights and the directive principles is essential for the realization of the aims of the Constitution. In the landmark Minerva Mills versus Union of India judgment, the court held that the harmony and balance between the fundamental rights and directive principles of state policy is an essential feature of the basic structure. Any amendment to the Constitution that disturbs this balance will be unconstitutional. In the Unnikrishnan versus State of Andhra Pradesh case, the court converted the directive principle that existed under Article 45 at that time into a fundamental right, leading to the introduction of Article 21A, which is the right to education. The current Article 45 that we read is the modified version after the right to education was moved into the fundamental rights section. In the Samatha versus State of Andhra Pradesh case, the Supreme Court referred to clauses B and C of Article 39 and emphasized the state's responsibility to prevent the concentration of wealth so as to ensure a common good. In the MC Mehta versus Union of India case in 2004, the court cited Article 47, that is, raising the standard of living, and directed the conversion of all public transport in Delhi to CNG to ensure a healthier living environment. And in the more recent Nandini Sundar versus Union of India case, the Supreme Court referred to Articles 39, 41 and 48A of the Directive Principles to emphasize the state's duty to ensure a right to life, right to livelihood, and protect the environment. And with that, we have come to the end of this video. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below. We will meet again shortly in the next video. Till then, take care, stay safe.